Good morning, everyone. It's Timmy. It is March 9th, 2021, and I am excited to read the news broadcast to you all today. Currently, members of our union and of the Rocky Mountain Pride Coalition are rallying in support of trans rights in front of City Hall. They'll be distributing zines. The zines are on their way, and they'll also be collecting food and clothing donations. People are going to be calling into the city council meeting, some displaying pride flags, some confronting Jill Gabler about her recent comments about trans women in sports, which are very transphobic and hurtful to the community. I think it's important to go out there. It'd be really great to get some, if you're available. I guess that this will probably be released by then, but I wish I were able to be there. So thanks to everyone who is able to go out there and for everyone who is out there right now. If you missed it and you'd still like to support the union, I'll have the link to our Venmo and Patreon and CashApp in the description. And we also have a donation drop-off at America the Beautiful Park from 5 to 7 p.m. on Thursday. So, hope you can make it. In local news, footage has emerged of Colorado Springs police allowing a police dog to viciously attack a man named John Mullins while he was stepping out of the shower. The police had broke into his house to arrest him. Mullins could not hear them. The footage is very graphic. It was shared in our Discord, and had previously been making their rounds on Twitter. So I still, wish that they would. The city government really did not listen to the protests that happened this summer. The protests got kind of COINTELPRO'd out of off the rails, and so the city government managed to get away with not only not defunding the police but putting in 10 new cops, and so hopefully in the next few months we can get back together and keep pushing the city to defund the police, because policing is not the way that we should be handling our social economic issues. I've said a bunch, it's almost like it'll be one of the first sayings in the Little Red Book of Sayings of Timmy Vilgiati, but you need to focus on treating the underlying issues, and the way to do that is not through punitive measures and through violence, but through reconciliation, through community building, through efforts that focus on improving the actual material conditions and making people feel like they belong in a community and that their needs are being met. So, the kinds of police brutality that CSPD manages to get away with, it's obfuscated by the way that their reporting system works for this, is they kind of filter all the data out, and the police advisory board that they put in place is stacked. It has tons of people on it that are heavily sympathetic to the police. People who are affected by police brutality were very underrepresented, and it ended up kind of basically putting forward a whole lot of status quo type solutions, and or really just proposals that don't really represent solutions. So it's sad it's sad to see that happen, and I just hope that yeah. 6 bills are before the Colorado State Legislature today. HB 211090 would lift criminal penalties for possessing 2 ounces or less of marijuana and allow people with a felony conviction have their records sealed. The bill is currently being debated by the House Judiciary Committee. If anything, I felt like it was not strong enough in such an artificially low threshold for where to lift the criminal penalties. I think that the criminal penalties in general should be lifted altogether, but I've said that many times before. Another bill before the Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, quote, requires the State Department of Human Services to establish a veteran suicide prevention pilot program to reduce the suicide rate and suicidal ideation among veterans by providing no-cost, stigma-free, confidential, effective behavioral health treatment for post-9/11 veterans and their families. The department is permitted to enter into an agreement with a nonprofit organization to administer the pilot program. Another program that's being debated today, another one which is kind of related, is HB 211097, which follows up on the recommendations of a behavioral health task force intending to create a state behavioral health agency to administer the state's behavioral health priorities. Another bill, SB 21067, is being debated on the Senate floor, and it establishes standards for civic education and creates a certification system for civics literacy in public schools. The bill outlines a set of standards around the criteria of knowledge, so about how the government works, skills about evaluating information and news media stuff, dispositions, which is like a set of attitudes towards the civic world, which is that's the part where it gets the most Foucauldian, because it's like trying to inculcate children with these like mythical values about the United States in a way that doesn't always engender critical thinking. And then behaviors, which includes voting and calling your legislature, just being civically active. In general, I think that more civics education is a good thing. Although there's always deeper structural stuff that you can talk about, but I do think that that kind of civic stuff is good. In news that I found very disturbing and it made me really angry and sad, the Tenacious Unicorn Ranch is a trans community and alpaca ranch in southern Colorado, and they've recently been threatened by 3%ers and militia members who are being encouraged by Westcliff-based publisher of right-wing newspaper Sangre de Cristo Sentinel. The ranch reports on Twitter that the militias have made incursions into their land at night, armed, looking to do harm to the people and animals that live on the ranch. In a statement on Twitter, they say, quote, "We are not a militia. We are trans folk providing a safe haven for the queer community on an alpaca ranch. This threat has stripped us of our ability to work off-ranch and to go about our lives. Financial aid will be used for our security needs. The last I heard, they are safe, but they can always use support. If you'd like to give to the Tenacious Unicorn Alpaca Ranch, you can go to the GoFundMe link that I will put in the description." A Jefferson County, Kentucky judge dismissed all murder charges against Kenneth Walker, who returned fire as the police broke into his house in a late-night raid on his apartment, killing his girlfriend Breonna Taylor. The cops who killed Breonna Taylor have yet to be arrested, but they were fired earlier this year. Members of the grand jury say that they were not presented with sufficient evidence or given the option by the Attorney General of charging the officers with homicide for the killing, which some of them have actually tried to sue the Attorney General's office. Derek Chauvin, an ex-cop who murdered George Floyd, will be going on trial Thursday after the jury selection was delayed one day by Chauvin's lawyers disputing the third-degree murder charge, which was just reopened by the prosecutor in the Court of Appeals. The jury selection I saw has already gone underway. The jurors were kind of shielded from public view, so they were not subject to harassment, and they are being selected. It's been hard. I mean, it's a high-profile case, so it's going to be hard to find people who are, sufficiently unfamiliar with the details to have, to be ready to serve on the jury. The RNC and former President Trump are clashing over the RNC. I moved my chair. Using his name in fundraising after his attorneys sent out a cease and desist letter. Trump is urging people to donate to his PAC instead of the RNC. And personally, I think that we should all encourage this infighting as much as possible. For instance, did you know that we can start to share this interesting information that is leaked to me? Did you hear that the entire RNC was laughing at Trump for getting vaccinated? Did you hear that? They laughed at him. They were laughing at him. And frankly, he should sue the RNC for that. I think he should. I think he should sue the RNC. Very good use of your energy, very good use of your money. A lot of people are saying it. Very smart people, too, I should add. Should add that some of the most smart people. You wouldn't even believe it. So smart. An Oath Keeper, this is other Trump-related news, an Oath Keeper named Roberto Minuto was photographed with Roger Stone on the morning of January 6th, and he was arrested. Trump had pardoned Stone after he lost the election. While Stone acknowledged that the Oath Keepers had provided security for him, he denied having anything to do with the insurrection at the Capitol, saying that he did not leave his hotel until going to the airport later that day. Cool. You weren't at the insurrection, but you were still meeting with the Oath Keepers right before, and then the Oath Keepers breached the Capitol and saw you right before, and also just kind of weird that you've got the Oath Keepers as, like, doing private volunteer security for you. Like, the Oath Keepers are a very far-right group of, like, former law enforcement and military folks who are, like, resolutely just very alt-right, right-wing folks. I mean, like, I know that a couple of folks I know have been, like, doxxed or like on a list of people the Oath Keepers want to dox, and, like, I've been harassed by people connected with them, so it's just like, well, the fact that they were just doing security for you in the morning outside of a hotel just doesn't sound legit, and plus Roger Stone's just a sketchy dude. Anytime that guy's around anything, something sketchy's happening. Like, that dude is just sketchy. Okay? Sketch. President Biden's German Shepherds reportedly bit a security guard and were sent back to Delaware. When questioned, the dogs said, quote, "All cops are bad means all cops are bad. Fuck the system. Fuck 12. That's what the dogs said. Joe Biden is known for having some pretty radical German Shepherds hanging out around his house, some radical pets. Joe Biden himself does not speak to animals, and so is unable to access the shamanic lines of communication necessary to interview the dogs and ask them why they did it. But fortunately, I did. The Democratic Socialist, this is interesting news. Democratic Socialists of America swept the race for leadership of the Nevada Democratic Party, and after calling through this whole campaign for unity and setting aside our differences, like, the entire staff of the Democratic Party quit. Like, the whole mainstream staff quit because, like, apparently unity only matters when it is in defense of capitalism and Harry Reid's electoral machine. It's a pretty cool step towards the formation of a real socialist party, I think. I think that, because, I mean, it's all but one of the people that won election to the leadership of the Nevada Democratic Party were members of the DSA, dues-paying members of the DSA. And they're planning on focusing on year-round organizing around social, economic, and environmental justice at a grassroots level. And I hope that they will maybe even consider breaking with the National Democratic Party altogether and serve as an example for the rest of the country, because DSA can be a little bit reformist sometimes, but at least it's elevating socialist policies into the national conversation, and it is providing it's providing at least one left alternative to the two main capitalist parties. Personally, yeah. So I've kind of said my piece multiple times about how I feel like I don't feel like it's worth working necessarily with the Democratic Party anymore, but I'll move past that and go on to this next story that someone shared at our Discord. A study conducted at Princeton University and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that life expectancy for Americans without a college degree is declining, even while the life expectancy gap between races narrows. This is further evidence of the massive class imbalances perpetuated by education, differences, those education differences can be both geographic, where certain school districts, for reasons of historic segregation or just a concentration of economic resources, do not have access to like high quality education supplies, teachers. Their facilities are like breaking down. If you go to in Colorado Springs, if you go to like a lot of the schools in District 11, like Queen Palmer and a few others, have scored very low on their infrastructure scorecards, with like their roofs in need of repairs, their vent systems in need of repairs. So and then you have other school districts like Cheyenne Mountain, where they have a ton of money because they're right next to the Broadmoor and all these super rich areas, and that's a pattern repeated across the country. Also repeated with like the private schools, where like rich people get to send their kids, and kind of drain resources out of the public schools. So what this does is it really evidences like the working class, like the people who are running the country, are facing like deteriorating conditions. Republicans, when they're trying to oppose the stimulus bill or the COVID relief bill, were saying like, oh, the economy is doing great now. Well, it's doing great for like rich people who have investments in the stock market. It's doing great for like petty bourgeoisie people who can live fairly comfortable lives and work from home. But for a lot of working class people, it's been really shitty lately. Like we talked yesterday about the dock workers in Los Angeles and in Oakland, who have been faced with incredibly high risks of COVID exposure. And we also talked about the steel workers in Pennsylvania who are going on strike after their company that they work for tried to offer them like a reduced amount of pay and like reduced benefits and all sorts of kind of shitty things in a new 4-year contract with their union, and inequality is rising. Every time that the stock market goes up, very few people are really benefit from that. It's mainly people who already have money to invest, and inequality is rising with that, and it's killing people, and it's often killing people in ways that you don't necessarily realize, since capitalist hegemony conditions us to view all the like irrationalities and power imbalances and injustices associated with capitalism as natural and self-evident. And this study by Princeton University, so this is kind of reading into this, but this decrease in life expectancy for Americans without a college degree, that's at least what I make of it. Moving to international news, we're going to skirt around because I started it yesterday, and some of the Africa news is wedged. It is like, it's just not in geographical order this time. Please forgive me. Canadian billionaire mining investor has secured funding for a $200 million mining project in Guinea Conakry's Nimba Mountains on the southern border with Liberia, to a designated World Heritage Site whose boundaries were redrawn to enable the extraction of iron. So this is going to be a project that the kind of wealthy investor mining class is very, very excited about. But since Guinea doesn't have sufficient port infrastructure, they are not actually going to be exporting the iron ore through Guinea. They're going to be exporting it through Liberia. In case you're worried about the Canadian billionaire mining investor whose name I did not write down losing money on this deal, please don't worry. The billionaire is going to be fine because the World Bank's insurance arm, the quote multilateral investment guarantee agency, will guarantee the project against risk. So please remain calm if you're worried about the potential for political instability preventing the miners or the mining companies from extracting iron ore on this World Heritage Site. Moving Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip ahead and then I will, because I just really feel like it needs to be in geographical order. And if I don't do it in geographical order, it'll just feel weird. So I'll move on to some news from Uganda and Senegal. Ugandan opposition leader Bobby Wine is calling for peaceful protests after the Ugandan military issued a statement warning that his supporters plan to riot following the withdrawal of a petition contesting the January election results and stationed police and troops accordingly throughout the capital of Kampala. Oh my god, I just wasn't sure if I was going to burp again. Incumbent Yoweri Museveni won the election in January by a margin of 58% to 35%, but Wine has called the results fraudulent, pointing to instances of soldiers stuffing ballot boxes, casting ballots for people, and chasing people away from polling sites, which is probably not what I would call like free and fair elections. In a statement Tuesday, Wine said that, quote, Ugandans must now rise to the occasion and resist Museveni and his regime of blood. As we have been saying, we are nonviolent and lawful. Our philosophy stands firm. People power is stronger than the people in power. End quote. So Museveni, for those of you who don't know, is a former guerrilla leader who was involved in the overthrow of Idi Amin and Milton Obote. He has ruled since 1986. Wine, meanwhile, is a former singer and businessman, and he is an outspoken critic of the government. His party, the National Unity Platform, advocates, quote, people-centered governance, quote, end quote, that will center this idea of facilitating the development of Uganda by, quote, upholding individual rights to education, health care, food security, clean water, and health care, and access to justice that guarantees those rights, while also empowering the private sector to create jobs and stimulate growth. So, on one level, it's good to see this It's like, and I'll kind of paraphrase what Marxists.com said about this, because I agree with their assessment of this, that it is good to see these like anti-establishment politicians who are opposing corruption and opposing these kinds of entrenched political establishments in their countries. But looking over the manifesto of the National Unity Platform in Uganda, it doesn't really mention imperialism or neocolonialism, and it doesn't mention the role that capitalism plays in maintaining the current economic issues in Uganda. And so it's ultimately, I think, a positive step away from dictatorship, but it's not sufficient, which is, I feel like, a thing that I've said too many times and almost becomes redundant. It's just like, you should just remember, like, I'm probably not going to be happy with it no matter what happened. Like, it's very rare that I'm never going to be happy. I just sit here and I'm sad all the time. All the time. You can tell from my shirt. The shirt says despair. That's what this shirt is. Enough of that. Enough of my humor. I'll move ahead to Senegal because I do want to follow up on that. I've been following the situation there because I feel a little bit like odd expressing kind of like support for Ousmane Sonko with the rape allegation, just because my inclination is pretty much to believe sexual assault survivors and to reject this idea of like these accusations being used in a political way, which is what he's trying to say. And I kind of feel like that I just don't feel that doesn't sit well with me. But apparently, from what I've seen, so this was something I did not realize. Many critics of Macky Sall, of current Senegalese President Macky Sall, have been arrested by the Senegalese government and like charged with things basically on wholly politically manufactured crimes, which is a troubling pattern, and it does raise questions about this arrest. Ousmane Sonko argued that protests should continue peacefully without aiming to depose Sall extrajudiciously, but he did promise that, quote, the revolution is marching its way to 2024. Saul expressed his sympathy with the youth taking to the streets. For his part, he said that he believes their anger to be economically motivated, and he promised to work to increase economic and employment opportunities. Reuters reported that previous opponents of Saul have faced criminal charges. Yeah, so that was what I had just mentioned. Government is denying that this is a politically manufactured type thing. Clearly, Sonko's supporters do not believe that. This is coming, though, as a wave of protests throughout Africa, really, not just in Uganda and Senegal, but authorities in Niger have shut down the internet and charged a former prime minister with attempting to overthrow the government following a disputed election last month. In Chad, security forces were engaged in a gun battle at the main opposition candidate's house, in which his mother was killed ahead of elections next month. In Benin, where elections are taking place in April, opposition candidates have effectively been outlawed thanks to a recent change in electoral law. So there's all these kinds of... and then there's the NSAR, it's like hashtag NSARS, I think, which is the special arm. It's like a force that it's a tactical unit that cracks down on and is meant to limit robbery in Nigeria. SARS, and I don't remember what it stands for because I didn't write it down. But there have been protests in Nigeria calling for the abolition of SARS for quite some time, and so with these protest movements going on in Uganda and Senegal, it does convey hope that this new generation of African youth is rising up against the corrupt establishments in their country, that they're rising up for ultimately like expanded social services, not necessarily like full-on socialism or communism, but at the stage of material conditions that they're in, this is the point that they're at in development. Although at the same time, like, the counter to that would be that a lot of the like stateless African societies, like in Igbo land and elsewhere, which is in southeastern Nigeria, were extremely successful, managed disputes like very efficiently, and it's this intrusive colonial styled government coming into Africa and trying to create these nation states that I think is like really what needs to be challenged too as this goes about. But I think it is optimistic, and I also, they don't need me telling them how to do their revolution. So good luck guys. Solidarity from Colorado with all of the people in Africa that are currently trying to rise up against oppression. The Supreme Court overturned Lula da Silva's convictions from the Lava Jato corruption and money laundering scandal on jurisdictional grounds, clearing the way for the former Brazilian socialist president to run again in 2022 against Jair Bolsonaro. Recent polling published in Estado do São Paulo suggests that Lula would lead Bolsonaro 50-38, although Bolsonaro dismisses the chances of Lula's candidacy. Bolsonaro supporters view Lula's Partido Trabalhador as irredeemably corrupt due to revelations about high-ranking party members using their positions to advance their private interests. Likewise, members of the Brazilian Communist Party have criticized the Partido do Trabalhador for its overly conciliatory attitude towards capitalists and its approach towards class collaboration, also its willingness to compromise on issues like land reform. But at the same time, Lula is fondly remembered for major social programs that he put in place in Brazil, like the Bolsa Familia, which provides essentially like a universal basic income to low-income families in Brazil, contingent on their children attending school. A little bit of social engineering there, but it also is addressing like a genuine concern about the reason families don't send their kids to school a lot of the time is because they are relying on their kids to help provide income for the household. So it was a beneficial policy. Bolsonaro supporters really believe they're extremely corrupt, and Bolsonaro does not think that he's got a chance. Bolsonaro ran heavily against them, but in general, it does not seem. It seems like Lula would actually have a pretty good chance against Bolsonaro. Women rallied around the world for International Women's Day yesterday, with major rallies occurring even under the threat of far-right counter-protests in some places, like in Belarus and Poland. And in Poland, the march came after last year's protests against the abortion restrictions that the Polish government instituted. In Mexico City, hundreds of women, some carrying their children, others armed with blowtorches, bats, and hammers, marched on the presidential palace in Mexico City, hoping to force the government to confront violence against women, which has remained at high levels throughout the country. Protesters spray painted the names of assault victims on the barricade around the presidential palace and clashed with riot police. The New York Times reports that many were angered by AMLO's decision to continue to back a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Guerrero who was accused of rape. An estimated 62 police officers and 19 civilians were injured. So that is the news that I have for you today. I kind of tried to cover a broad swath of... Oh, wait, no, it's not all the news I have for you today. What the heck am I doing? God. I don't even know why I'm, so foggy today. I didn't do anything to deserve this. You know what I think it is I woke up at 5 in the morning and I couldn't fall back asleep. And I just started working on this. And I just kept working on it until 8. And then I went back to sleep. And then I slept until 9:30. And then I woke up at 9:30 and my psychiatrist was texting me hey, your no-show today. You need to reschedule the appointment. And I was like, oh fuck, I had an appointment with you. God damn it. I thought it was at 10 too, and I was thinking I was gonna get up, was gonna have everything together. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just there's just this fog. There's this fog. I was thinking I'd be more energetic, but no. I don't know what it is. Okay, I'm getting back to the other news stories I wanted to cover, because these were important, and I'm sorry I forgot them. I just kind of skipped ahead because I wanted to keep it in geographical order. So, the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy, which is a think tank connected to Fairfax University of America in Washington, D.C., released a report assessing the Chinese government's state responsibility for the commission of genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, according to the definitions laid out in the 1949 Genocide Convention, which was ratified by the Chinese government in 1983. Using a mixture of publicly available and leaked government material, eyewitness reports, and satellite imagery, along with input from experts on the region, they concluded that China has acted with the intention of ethnically cleansing Uyghurs, even if that's not their stated intention, and that the state bears responsibility for genocide. There's very troubling rhetoric that they highlighted in their report, where the Chinese government refers to the Uyghurs as tumors that need to be cleansed from the body politic, which is, for those of you who are scholars of Nazism, is very similar to the kind of rhetoric Hitler would use about the Volkskörper, or about the kind of rhetoric that right-wing fascists, what other kind of fascists are there? That the fascist government in Argentina during the 30s so during the 30s would use against indigenous people. There's been similar rhetoric used all around the world to very troubling effects. They noted that the government is sponsoring campaigns to decrease birth rates among Uyghurs, to implant Han Chinese families in Uyghur households, encourage marriage between Han Chinese and Uyghurs, to build these mass internment camps where Uyghurs are re-educated, and literally the description in the Chinese government leaked documents is brainwashing, basically. It's wash clean the brains, or it's something, so it's an inversion of that phrase, but it's still essentially, they're trying to brainwash people. There's been reports of rapes inside of these internment camps. There's been reports of prison labor being used to manufacture masks that get exported to the United States. So it's bad. It's really bad. I think that
Yeah, that this is bad. And with the way that the Chinese government talks about like we must make sure strong patriots are in charge of Hong Kong, and like trying to have this military buildup in the South China Sea on the border with India, this stuff that they're trying to do, like the Belt and Road initiatives, are imperialism. It veers into fascism. I mean, I think it's bad. I think like Mussolini started out. He was a socialist at one point. He was the leader of like. It was a syndicalist. Is actually where he got a lot of syndicalism. Is actually where he got a lot of his organizing tactics from. And he started out with a lot of communists in his like fasci, which was a tightly bound like militant group of people who just idealized violence. So I mean, it's not like It's not like fascism in the same sense of like Mussolini's fascism, but it's definitely like authoritarian nationalism in the same vein as Mussolini, following a lot of the same like kind of troubling patterns of imperialism and ethnic cleansing that characterize fascist states. And to be fair, I think that there's always this troubling thing with like trying to equate a communist party with a fascist party, but at this point, like they're functioning like a fascist party, like their embrace of capitalism and that side of stuff, plus their like idea that they're gonna like make China like powerful and great again, like it's very very reminiscent of fascism, and it is disturbing to me. And if you're a Maoist or someone who vehemently defends the Chinese government, feel free to disagree with me. I'm happy to talk with you or like look at other things if I'm like not paying attention to the right things. I did try to look at this New Lines Institute study to make sure that the like it wasn't being funded by the CIA or whatever. And I mean, it doesn't say on the cover it's funded by the CIA, obviously, but yeah, I mean, if there's someone who wants to try to defend them or like be like, no, you American pig, that's not true. Look at this information if you want to call yourself a leftist. And I'll be like, okay, I'll look at that information. I will look at the information. I'll probably disagree with you, but I mean, we can have a conversation. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying. Just troll me in the comments. Troll me in the comments. Do it. This is more news from Myanmar. Zam Yat Lin died. He's another official from the National League for Democracy in Myanmar who was killed after being taken into custody at 1:30 a.m. on Tuesday night. As I had mentioned before, they were doing a lot of midnight raids in order to terrorize people using flashbangs and live ammunition. The death toll from the military government's crackdown has passed 60, according to the most recent report, and there's more than 1,800 people in prison. Last night, 50 protesters defying the curfew were surrounded and then arrested by the police. So 50 protesters were arrested. A bunch of protesters, though, were surrounded, and hundreds of them managed to escape. Only 50 actually managed to be taken into custody. Global New Light Myanmar, which is the source of information from the military side of things, reports the bullying of government officials, cancel culture, who are not supporting the protests on Facebook. Cancel culture, and banned 5 media groups from publishing in the country. While the military used the platform to float new systems of ethnic identification cards and the closure of camps for internally displaced persons. So troubling. Troubling stuff. Global New Light Myanmar is my new favorite place to go when I need to like know what it's like to live in a terrifying dystopia run by an evil military. I mean, who am I to talk? I live in the United States. I mean, like, the government, like, there's probably like 9 different government agencies like spying on me right now, and I probably like live like within like 30 miles of like multiple acts of genocide conducted by, I mean, like, there's been so much genocide in the history of the United States that like the Chinese government does go ahead and say like, well, when I think of the United States, I think about when I think about the genocide, I think about what the United States did to Native Americans, and that's not what we're doing to the Uyghurs. which is like, your genocide your genocide has different aesthetics than ours did. Like, it's still genocide and it still is bad. Like, that's the and it's a symptom of this authoritarian nationalism. I don't even know if and as I say that, I'm kind of like, I feel like fascism's thrown around a lot, but I call it whatever you want. It sucks. And like, but the fact that there's this general strike going on in Myanmar gives me a lot of hope. This movement by these farmers in India gives me a lot of hope. The ongoing efforts of the Mutual Aid and Solidarity Union and the 401 group in Austin who are occupying Rosewood Park, that gives me a lot of hope as well. And I'd really like to go interview them at some point. I'd really like to also do maybe at some point like a rambly thing about like a place where I can be more openly rambly about ideology or something, because it'd be fun. But yeah, with that said, I need to get to my new work of reading Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology. We'll be having a book club tonight if you want to join us, by the way. It's James Scott's Seeing Like a State. But yeah, with that said, the revolution will triumph. The capitalists will fall. They will taste the leather of our underboots as we grind them into dust.